Hey guys, it's the Red Shadow. Welcome back to my channel, and this time I am sitting down to do a video, a start of a series that I've been wanting to do for a while. And it's basically, I've sort of sat down and thought about what my favorite video games of all time are, and revised the list and condense it to a top 30 along with a handful of honorable mentions. Now, if you've watched any of my older videos, if you're one of the few people who's been around since I started years ago, you'll know, you may have even seen the playlist of my favorite games, and that playlist I think is like 40 some games or whatever. But that playlist was me sitting down, I don't know, what is it, 6-7 years ago, and talking about a handful of video games from over the years that I really loved and that have stuck with me. And I talked about each game in its own individual video. This is meant to be a little bit more of a shorter experience. I'm going to break the 30 games plus the honorable mentions down into videos of 5. So this video is going to be games number 30, 29, 28, 27, and 26. And then the next video will cover the next 5 as we get closer to my top games of all time. And then, like I said, probably one video for the honorable mentions. What I want to do in this, though, is still talk a little bit about each game, show each game, at least for the ones that I have physical copies of, and also show how, one, all those games I talked about before, where they actually sort of rank. Plus, I think you're going to see games in this list that weren't a part of that group, and you'll see some games from that group that aren't necessarily in the top 30. You know, if you're like me and you play a lot of video games and you play new stuff all the time, then you'll find what am I trying to say? You would find what your preferences of what you like can change. Plus, lots of people say that their lists are subject to change. Their favorite game today might not be their favorite game tomorrow. All I can ever really say about my list is, for the last 20 plus years, or at least for the last 15, my top 1 and 2 games have stayed the same too. And unless something amazing comes out and can unseat either of those games, they'll always be my number 1 and my number 2 game. But from number 3 on out, all that kind of stuff is fluid. But I just wanted to make these videos to sort of document my games and my feelings on these games right now, and then, like I said, they could change down the road, but it's something fun to do. And I especially wanted to actually show all these games and that I own these games. I don't think there's any of these games that I don't have a physical copy of, with the exception of one that's only a digital game. So anyway, before I continue to talk way too long, let's get started on the list. And as I said before, this is a top 30 list, so we'll be starting with number 30. And I need to preface this whole thing with a statement. Remember, this is my top 30 favorite games. This is not me stating what I think are the top best games of all time. These are my 30 favorite games. Games that made me laugh, made me think, made me emotional, and have just stuck with me all this time. So when you see number 30 and you're like, why would that be in anybody's top games list? Remember, it's my favorite games, not the best games of all time. So, without further ado, number 30 on my list is a PlayStation 2 budget title called Dog's Life. And this is very much a budget title game about a dog named Jake who witnesses one of his dog friends, a female dog that he's kind of sweet on, get abducted or dog napped by some sketchy dog catchers and whisked away to the city, and Jake decides that he has to go and try to rescue this dog. And he goes through multiple levels. There's basically 3 major zones. The starting areas around the like farmland that Jake lives on, and then at some point you end up on a mountain at a ski resort in a little town, and then you end up in the final levels in the city itself. The game is done in both first person and third person modes. Third person for most of your traversal, running around, jumping, chasing after things, barking. First person, though, is a really cool mode where you go into what's called smell-o-vision. I believe that's what it was called in Dog's Life. I could be thinking of something else altogether. But what it does in that part of the game is allow you, as Jake the dog, to see scents, to simulate a dog smelling things and chasing after scents and wanting to know what it's all about. And they incorporated it into little mini games that include the ability to pee on things. And I feel like I have to tell this story. A big reason why I wanted to get this game years ago when I did was because I saw it in a video game magazine, and it showed pictures of Jake in different situations. And one of those situations was Jake on the hood of a police car taking a dump. Yes, in this game, they allow you to pee and poop as a dog. And even more so, if you eat something and then you do the control, you'll poop. If you attempt to do the control again after not having pooped or not having ate, Jake will just fart. Yes, it's very base, juvenile humor, but at the time and even now, I still love that kind of stuff. As a guy who loved Beavis and Butthead back in the day, I love a good poop or fart jokes, and something like that in a video game, especially as a dog, to me was just hilarious. But the story won me over. The cheesy writing and bad voice acting and all that kind of stuff, I don't know, it just left a mark on me. Something I'll probably say about a lot of these games. But if a game, a story, the world and the characters that are built within it just have a certain kind of charm or whatever, like, it will stay with me. And that's a big reason for why Dog's Life is on my list. Although, like I said, it's the reason why it's number 30 on my list, because you're about to see that it kind of rubs elbows with some heavy hitters. But that's game number 30. So next up, we're going to be game number 29 on my list. And this is a PS1 classic. And that's Silent Hill from Konami. The survival horror game from the PlayStation era. I wanted to say, 1999, when Silent Hill came out. In 1999, I'd had a PlayStation for a couple of years. I had played Resident Evil. I enjoyed Resident Evil. I had probably played a few other things that were attempts at being scary. But this sumbitch right here, this, to me, was the beginning of true horror in video games. For me. Like I said, there may be some other horror games out before this that I've just never played or even maybe heard of. But to me, this is where it really got psychological. It's where it really got weird. It's where it really got just bizarre. And I love it not because it gives me good feelings, but because it gives me bad feelings. Because it freaks me out. Because of the content within it. Resident Evil did, like zombies and other kinds of creatures, but it was still very grounded in, like, reality. It's over the top and it has horrible voice acting, but Silent Hill's voice acting isn't always necessarily better, but Silent Hill feels out of this world, creepy, like, the stuff of nightmares. By this point, and I'm speaking as somebody in 2021, zombies are very overplayed, but there's still lots of games and movies and shows that do zombies right and freshen it up a little bit. But zombies at this point are just like, oh, it's these undead and they're just wandering around and you shoot them and kill them and they can still get you and it's still dangerous, but still the stakes don't always feel as high, in my opinion. In Silent Hill, it's just there's no rules. It's no holds barred. It's nightmarish psychological stuff, and the story, the what it's supposed to mean. I couldn't even sit here and try to speculate. I know there's lots of theories, and maybe some of them have even been stated to be fact, that it's definitely deep and cerebral type stuff that's symbolic of a lot of things. But to me, it's just that it's so out there, and dark and foreboding. I don't even know. I'm finding myself speechless to really explain it. But it's Silent Hill. It's amazing. And it's a shame that the series is caught in some form of its own purgatory now, with the cancellation of Silent Hills a few years ago, and like an unknown future, because Konami doesn't really seem to want to make video games out of their video game properties. But anyway, Silent Hill, it's number 29 on my list. And next up, we're going to move on to something from around the same time frame. In fact, I think this is from the same year, 1999, 2000 is what it's showing on the case. But this is Shenmue. Shenmue. Tell me which pronunciation is correct, because I've heard both. I always just usually say Shenmue. But this is, to me, the best game on the Dreamcast. Now, I know there are other great games like Skies of Arcadia and Sonic Adventure and like all kinds of other stuff, but this is the game for me that put the Dreamcast on the map. That's Shenmue, a game that I remember reading about in magazines for a long time. The budget for it, the scope of it, the real-time, like day-night scheduling type thing, and characters in this world would be in certain places at certain times, so you'd catch them if you were there at the right time, you'd miss them if you didn't. And this story about a guy whose father gets killed in front of him by this crazy guy who wanted this item that was a mirror, except it was not a mirror. I don't really remember or know what the explanation was for that. The item looked more like an amulet, but they kept referring to it as a mirror. But when this finally came out, I don't think I got to play this when it released, because I don't think I got my Dreamcast until like 2001 or 2002. But this was an absolute must-have for me, and when I did finally get to play it, I loved it from start to finish. It's slow. It's possibly it would possibly be boring to some people, but I thought it was a fantastic game, and I was eager to play the second game. But the Dreamcast was already, on its last legs, and the second game didn't get released in the US, only in Japan for the Dreamcast. But then later on, it did end up coming to America and North America on the Xbox. I have Shenmue 2 for the Xbox, but I didn't grab it for the sake of this video because I've never played it. It was so many years after it came out that I was able to get it. In fact, it was probably within the last 7 or 8 years that I was able to pick that up, and I just never did pop it in. I was always like, I want to replay the first game, and then Dreamcast. I have a Dreamcast I don't think you can see it from here, but I've got a Dreamcast over there on a shelf that I bought, and it didn't work. I bought it used. It didn't work. It was cheap. I still have it. I eventually bought a new one, and I have replayed the first Shenmue on it, but never did finish it. And then Shenmue 3 was going to come along, and I was like, man, I really need to replay it. So I tried to play it again on the Dreamcast, but I never did beat it. And then, thankfully, this came along. Shenmue 1 and 2 together on the PS4. Now, I have played this just a couple years ago, not that long after this came out, with both 1 and 2 on it. But I got stuck near the end. I'm pretty sure I'm close to the end. There's a part in the first Shenmue where you're racing on your motorcycle, and it actually turns into like a motorcycle game. It's not a race, but you're on your motorcycle trying to go really fast. And I can never get past that. I don't know how it is. I managed to get past it before on the Dreamcast version, but on this version, the last time I tried to play it, I could not get past that race, that motorcycle part. But one of these days, I'll pick it back up and finish that off and get through the first game so I can play number 2, and then I can play number 3, which I do own the PS4 version. I was a part of the Kickstarter for the PS4 version when it came along, and I'm excited to play the trilogy of games that we've already got for this, even though I know that there's still supposed to be more, and I hope we get a 4, but I also hope that that'll just be the end. I can't remember the name of the developer, the guy who created Shenmue. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I hope he doesn't try to... It was originally supposed to be a very long series, like 10 plus installments, and it barely got the 2 that were originally released, and 3 had to be a Kickstarter. So it's hopefully he'll just like maybe make a 4th game that wraps it all up. So that was game number 28 on my list. So game number 27 goes back to the original PlayStation, and we have Mortal Kombat Trilogy. There's a weird glare. I don't know how this is going to come through, but this is Mortal Kombat Trilogy for PS1. This is a greatest hits version. I don't even know off the top of my head if there's a regular Black Label version of this. Probably is. But this is a game that I love a lot, but I haven't touched it in years. The reason for that being that fighting games don't hold as much of a place in my heart as they may have back in like the 90s, and that's 2 reasons. One, just basic changes in taste and preference, and that plays into the other reason, which is in the 90s I lived in Montana, and I was near a handful of friends who we all played games with each other all the time, and we played a lot of multiplayer games, including fighting games. So I always had somebody to play these games with: Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Tekken, Killer Instinct, Primal Rage, like all kinds of stuff from the Genesis and Super Nintendo to the original PlayStation. We played tons of fighting games with each other. Well, once I moved here to Missouri back in 1999, I didn't have friends like that I did a lot of gaming with, really ever. In the last 20 years, there's been very little of that. And it's changed too. Back then it was couch co-op and couch multiplayer, where you're in the same room and you play the game on the same console. Now it's all online, and my online history is sketchy. You know, like I have internet, then I don't, and then I have it again, I don't. And I don't want to play against a lot of randoms. There's very few games in which I'll play just random people on the internet. So I think it just kind of ended my love of games like fighting series, racing games, even some of the sports games that I used to play. But anyway, Mortal Kombat Trilogy, the main reason why I love it so much was because I was a big Mortal Kombat fan, and there were basically 3 mainline games, and then this trilogy for the PlayStation put all three of those games essentially onto one. Basically, every level, or at least 99% of the levels, and every character, or 99% of the characters from those original games, are all here on this one game. And you can select whoever you want to face in whatever level that you want, and it's just basically like a big free-for-all of whatever, of the first three Mortal Kombat's, whatever you want to do with them, it's all right there. And I loved that. It had characters that I loved, those levels that I loved, the fatalities. Obviously, Mortal Kombat is known the world around for the fatalities. Being able to play on any level with any character was just the best of all worlds when it came to that. And lots of great memories playing against my friends. If we had more than two of us, if there was 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, 2 people would start playing. Whoever lost would be out for the next round. One of the other people would come in. The winner would continue on. The next time around, if the winner won again, then this guy was out, and another person who hadn't played would come in. And so you would either, like, everybody was basically getting to play. Sometimes if somebody won a lot in a row, they got to play more. But everybody was getting to play and have fun with it, and we loved that. So it's just a game that I always loved. All the stuff up to that point in one game, and then all those fun memories playing with my friends. That's why it's on my list there at number 27. If I'm doing my math right, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So that'll bring us to the last game for this first video. Like I said before, I'm doing 5 at a time in each of these videos. So this is game number 26, also original PlayStation game. This is King's Field 2. And this is a FromSoft game. So if you're a gamer of today, and you're familiar with Dark Souls and Bloodborne, Demon Souls, Sekiro, etc., etc., this is from the same company that did all of those, but this is from the 90s. This is from 1996. Now, King's Field 2 is a first-person RPG, basically, real-time, like action RPG, I guess you would call it, although this game is painfully slow. Like, the controls and the movement are super sluggish. I've been wanting to replay this game for a long time, but that's what keeps me away. Like, your character literally swings his sword like... And meantime, the enemies are still attacking you while you're trying to bring your sword down. But it's still really, really good. And it's tough, but I'm going to admit this right now, and I'm pretty sure I've said this a million times before on my channel, but I played this game with Game Shark codes so that I wouldn't die, so that all those difficult parts wouldn't be a hindrance for me. If I could play the Dark Souls and Bloodborne games either with an easy mode or with cheat codes, I would do it. I don't even mind, I'll admit that. I'm perfectly happy with From Software making games that are whatever they want them to be. I'm not mad that I won't, or that I can't play those games because they're tough. I won't put the time in to learn all the stuff that you're supposed to. I just want to play the games and experience the story. And see, that's what I love about King's Field 2, which is actually King's Field 3, I believe. This has a weird numbering thing. In Japan, there was a 1, 2, and 3, but in America, we got King's Field 2 as King's Field, and King's Field 3 as King's Field 2. I believe I'm correct in that. But if I had played this game back then and didn't have the Game Shark to help me through it, if I had tried to and struggled with it, I never would have experienced the game, and the story in this is really engaging to me. There's a king who gets infected by like this evil, and you're like a knight or whatever who goes to try to stop this evil king. And it's really hard to explain it, especially because it's been ages since I last played it, but I remember that atmosphere of the game was the main thing that sucks me into it. It's mysterious. The graphics are not great. I mean, they're early-ish PS1 graphics, but they still have a personality to it. The graphics convey as much about the story as almost anything else. It's very desolate. It could just be because of power constraints of the PS1 and the developers doing everything that they could, being that they decided to go with a fully 3D polygonal, graphical style and kind of an open world style. But back in that time frame, it's impressive what, say, the N64 was doing with Super Mario 64 around this same time. But the darkness, like in Silent Hill, I didn't mention it when I covered that one earlier, but Silent Hill has fog, which is kind of to mask the graphical weakness of the PS1 and what that game was trying to do, but it enhances the atmosphere of the game. King's Field 2 has that in the fact that it's very dark and gloomy. Plus, I think that's kind of a staple of FromSoft games. That's what I take from the Dark Souls and Bloodborne style games. They're real dark and grimy and mysterious and foreboding. This had a lot of that back then. But it was compelling to me to keep playing that game to see what was going to happen. Was I going to be able to save the land? Was I going to be able to stop and save this king? I even remember there being a female character in the game that was, in my opinion, she was a love interest. The amount of times you engage with her in the game I don't think is very much, but it was a very gripping tale of the interactions between my character and her. And I don't want to spoil anything, but that paid off in a way that I didn't see or expect. But just in general, I don't know. I'm not sure that I can explain it in any way that would do it justice. It's just a really cool game from back then that I still love to this day. A big through line for all of these videos is just going to be that despite the fact that it's probably been going on close to 15 to 20 years since the last time I played King's Field 2, it has stayed with me this whole time. And that's like I said, a common denominator in all of these games is no matter how long ago I played them, I will remember them forever. There's a shit ton of games that I have played, even a bunch of games back here on the shelves that I've played and couldn't tell you anything about my experience with them because even if they were fun, they weren't memorable for me. King's Field 2 and the other games that I just showed here, all of them memorable for me. Your mileage may vary, but all of those games for me were just I wanted to say breathtaking and pull a Keanu Reeves, but I don't know that I would say they're breathtaking. But like I said, they just have stayed with me for all these years, and I can't ever imagine any of them falling out of favor with me, for lack of a better phrase. So anyway, that's the first 5 on the list, 30 through 26. So next video will be 25 through 21. Hope you'll stay tuned for that. And, if anybody watches this, gets to this point in the video, comment down below some of your favorite games. Have you played any of these games? A lot of the games on this list will be games that everybody have played, and some of them will probably be kind of weird and obscure. So anyways, stay tuned for the next video, and we'll see you then.